In the meantime, let's bring in Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He is the former FDA commissioner and a CNBC contributor who serves on the boards of both Pfizer and Illumina. And Dr. Gottlieb, hearing this, the idea of a 25 million person city being shut down at this point, I mean, it's kind of hard to get your head around at this stage in the game. What do you think of what's happening in China?
Yeah, and to your point, when they say they have 50 cases, what they report are symptomatic cases. So those 50 cases are people who presented with symptoms. They have many more cases. They don't include asymptomatic cases, and they're not including people who become infected who aren't presenting for advanced care. So you can surmise that those 50 cases are people who became so acutely ill they had to present for care and they had symptoms. So they're dramatically undercounting exactly how much infection they have. We have no idea. This is a city the size of Texas. I think they're going to have a very hard time containing this if this has, in fact, gotten out of control inside that city, and there's some indication it may have. So this was always a difficult proposition for China to maintain this zero-COVID policy, and they didn't use the time that they had well. 50% of the population over the age of 65 isn't boosted, isn't vaccinated. They haven't deployed vaccines effectively among their older population. They certainly haven't boosted their older population. They've deployed vaccines that are proving to be less effective against Omicron. So I think it's going to be a very difficult circumstance there.
I had heard Eunice reporting very early this morning, talking about the idea that there is now some conversation among Chinese people in social media and other places kind of questioning the idea of why can't they have some of these Western vaccines because they think they're more effective against Omicron. Look, the Western vaccines may prevent you from getting really sick, but it doesn't stop the spread of Omicron. What can they do at this point? And is this a situation where they are going to be overwhelmed because of these cases? Because, to your point, they haven't taken the time to make sure that they're better prepared for when it does come.
Well, look, someone who's received a vaccine here in the United States and has been boosted and has had a recent booster within the last 4 to 6 months, those vaccines do reduce the risk of infection and transmission. Not nearly as much as they did when we were dealing with the old variants, but they do provide some meaningful protection against the risk of infection and transmission with Omicron. So, you know, it does buy you some reduction in the risk of advanced spread. The reality is you're right. Primarily what the vaccines are providing right now is protection against severe disease and hospitalization. But as we've seen in other countries like Hong Kong, which experienced a very devastating wave with a lot of death and disease, when you don't vaccinate your elderly population, the most vulnerable people in your society, you end up having very substantial impacts from the spread of this virus. And that's, in fact, the risk that China faces right now. A lot of their elderly population has not been vaccinated, certainly hasn't been boosted. So there's a lot of risk in that population. They did have a chance to deploy the mRNA vaccines. They had licensed the Pfizer vaccine in particular from BioNTech and had a Chinese manufacturer set up to manufacture that vaccine for that market, Fosun. Right. They made a decision not to do that and not to deploy it. I don't really understand why. It's not clear why they did that. They're now working on their own mRNA vaccine, but it's not going to be ready certainly in time for this wave if they do face a wave of infection right now.